Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the official visit by French President Emmanuel Macron to Egypt. This is actually his first visit to Egypt since taking office in 2017. This is upon the invitation, obviously, of President Abdel Sisi. The president announced that this year, 2019, will be the Egypt-France Cultural Cooperation year. This also coincides with the anniversary, the 150th year anniversary of the inauguration of the Suez Canal. We're going to be focusing on this visit tonight, and joining us here in the studio to shed more light on this visit is Ambassador Ali Al-Hifni, former Deputy Foreign Minister. We're also joined by Dr. محمد Abdalhalim, the political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding French President Emmanuel Macron concluding his three-day visit today to Egypt, and we'll be right back.
French President Emmanuel Macron continues his three-day visit to Egypt, ushering a new strategic relationship between Paris and Cairo in political, military and economic terms. French President Emmanuel Macron continued his three-day official visit to Egypt, bringing with him a high-level delegation, including government ministers like French Minister and the Finance Minister, and 24 representatives from academic, cultural and scientific fields, and a dozen business leaders, including the heads of the Rafah producer de sang. The French President met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayyib, and Pope Tawadros II, Pope of Alexandria and Patriarch of all Africa, on the Holy Apostolic See of Saint Mark. Earlier, the French President held close summit talks with President Abdel Sisi at the Ittihadiyya Palace, which tackled a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern, including the war on terrorism and illegal immigration, stability in the Middle East, in addition to means of fostering bilateral relations in various domains, notably the economic and military ones. At a joint press conference, President Sisi welcomed President Macron and hailed the distinguished and deep relations that bind the two nations since decades ago, and witnessed a big leap in the previous stage in various fields, reiterating his wishes to consolidate those ties in the future. President Sisi asserted that the two nations have close visions regarding a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern. He also affirmed that the two countries' partnership is a good and identical pattern for cooperation among the Mediterranean, asserting that the political will and the mutual desire to push forward the strategic partnership on all levels would realize the two sides' interests. For his side, the French President thanked President Sisi for the hospitality and asserted that the Paris was looking forward for more cooperation with Cairo in different fields in future, praising bilateral historic ties and asserting that Egypt is considered a big regional power and a key partner with the deserve all respect and appreciation from the French side. The two leaders vowed to strengthen their strategic partnership. Macron said Paris is looking forward to intensifying coordination with Egypt regarding a number of African affairs in the light of Egypt's near presidency for the African Union, especially in the fields that target the stability and security among African states, in addition to holding tri-cooperation between the two nations to support development fields in all.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion right away, Ambassador Hifni. Now, this is actually the first visit by President Macron to Egypt since he assumed the French presidency. What is the significance of the timing of this visit specifically now, when all the attention is focused on France and what's taking place there, and also focused on Egypt with it presiding over the African Union?
Well, you mentioned one of the factors that explains why now, but it's a due visit. President Abdel Sisi was in France And he addressed the invitation, formal invitation to President Macron to visit Egypt. So it was about time that he does visit Egypt, and we receive him here. Especially in view of the fact that there are so many developments pertaining to the overall situation in the region. And as you have just said, on the eve of the assumption by Egypt of its chairmanship of the African Union, President Fattah Sisi is eager also to talk about cooperation between France and Africa. He will be doing the same as far as other many partners of Africa during the whole year of that chairmanship, because he will be traveling in many places to attend important events, and he will be talking on behalf of Africa. He will be talking about the concerns of Africa, the interests of Africa, and especially with regard to our strive to develop economically and socially, and to integrate. And from there, we need the partnership, we need the assistance of our partners. France is one of our main partners in Africa. We need their assistance and their cooperation to dig more and give our focus and our full attention to infrastructure, because if we are going to witness an important development in the field of infrastructure through many projects in Africa, we will be better placed to achieve our integration.
Yes.
And create whatever we have convened to create in March in Kigali, Rwanda of the last year, creating a common market of Africa, or an economic free zone in Africa. So there are also the concerns with regard to the situation in Libya, situation in Syria particularly, but also in Yemen, and among other issues that we are going
and we're going to delve into that later on. Well, Dr. Abdulhalim, Egypt and France, they have a very strong and special connection and relationship. And really, it's the President announced that this year should be the Egypt-France cultural year. Can you shed light on the special relation and connection between both countries, not just politically or economically, but also culturally?
Right, Joab. Well, let us examine and analyze actually the sort of the very firm tie and the connection and the very deep relations actually that would bring both countries at one go, actually negotiating with each other with issues of mutual concern, of common consent, as much as of things that would seem to be of prime concern for each single individual party for its own sake. This is at one level. At another, actually, the sort of the historical ties and the very firm connection would go back actually to a couple of centuries ago. We would have to remember every now and again that Egypt at one time actually had been, you know, a French colony as much as being a British one indeed. Despite the fact that the impact of the English, I would say, was so, you know, I mean, massive, much more than the French, but still we did inherit a large number of principles of etiquette, of taciturn agreements, of political negotiations, and of even the French language, actually, was what it would bring with its own hail, actually. Actually, between both countries, you can really find a great deal of similarity, actually, since quite a long period of time, you know, apart from the geostrategic and the geopolitical relations, you can really find that also, you know, the Suez Canal had been part of the interest of the French colony at one time, digging every now and again, participating each single individual movement actually within the view of bringing at the end of the day, you know, a sort of a mutual heritage of mutual interest for both sides, I would say. France is very, I would say, diplomatic country in the real sense of the word, and the sense that actually sometimes it would propagate ethical details and values of decorum, actually, propagating things that would seem to be quite just for propaganda outside, just for the external, features of representing something, whereas they would hide something that would seem to be quite totally different from what has been propagated and negotiated. Still remember a year ago, in the presidential race towards UNESCO chancellor, actually, till the very last moment, actually, France, as being represented by Emmanuel Macron, would propagate the fact that it would deny and negate and detract from the words of pushing a bit forward one of its own candidates, till we find at the end of the day, Audrey Lezelou, actually, of a Jewish origin, actually, would go and would have its own way till the ascendancy, actually, of the seat of chancellor, in opposition to, Ambassador Mushira Khattab, despite the fact that I would really insist every now and again that she was the eligible nominee till the very end of it. But apart from this and that, we are very much tied within the same ditch, actually, exchanging mutual respectability and dignity and political interests as much as interests of mutual concern, I would say. The fact that, for one thing, the French people are very much admiring to the extent of fascinated by, Egyptology, by the ancient history of Egypt that would go back actually for about 5,000 years ago. And almost and it's only in Egypt, on the territorial land of Egypt, you can really find what you might call, Egyptology. You cannot find Americanology or Spanology or that sort of the thing. That's why they are very much fascinated. And during the high-profile visit, actually, on the part of Mr. Emmanuel Macron with his own wife, they expressed their own deep fascination, actually, and pride of place of interest, actually, within visiting the pyramids, Saqqara, Abu Simbel temple, as much as the cathedral in Abbasiyah and the Azhar as well. Sign of mutual respect towards, the glorification of the rights of the individuals, actually, to be free from all sects and creeds and taciturn, tussles and religious disputes, actually. They would seem to be quite, to a greater extent, admiring the Egyptian historical facts, the art of mummification and the art of preserving the mummies, actually, for about 5,000 years ago, to the extent that Mrs. Macron would express her own deep interest, actually, of sending, actually, the scholars within Christian, actually, religion to be highly educated into the high, peaceful ways of dealing with each other and the acceptance of the other in Al-Azhar.
Yes.
And this is a sign of mutual respect that would add to our own heritage, actually, as Egyptians, I would say.
Definitely. Well, Your Excellency, we've been focusing a lot over the past couple of years over the military cooperation as well between Egypt and France, and Egypt received the Rafale fighter jets from France. And the CEO, actually, of the company that produces the Rafale fighter jets was accompanying the president in his visit here. Now, both presidents really reiterated the importance of cooperating in the fight and the war against terrorism. Now, does the military cooperation between both countries and both reiterating the intention and the importance of cooperating in the fight against terrorism really dictate or is a strong sign of both of them having similar political points of view regarding what's taking place in this file specific?
You see, when we are talking about the specificity of the relations between Egypt and France at all levels, especially at the highest level, there is a very accurate reading from each party to the overall situation that prevails in the other party's country. The French enterprises producing military equipment, they have, of course, an interest in exporting to and providing our military needs as Egypt. And we do have our interests that make us require whatever we need to enhance our capacity, whether it is in the field of military or as far as the needs for our security forces to be able to confront terrorism, violence, criminality, and especially cross-border crimes. We have not just terrorists, but also the cross-border organized crime, talking about drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, among other things, other threats. And we do have an interest, both countries, to enhance our relations in the field of our military cooperation. But we shouldn't expect always to have deals signed during the visits, but to proceed the conversation and the understanding about how to push forward this cooperation. This requires the presence of the CEO of the enterprise that produce or manufacture the Rafale aircrafts. Anyway, this is one part of our cooperation, but the cooperation between Egypt and France goes beyond the military, goes beyond combating terrorism and violence and crime, and is very deep. There's a wide range of issues. You have mentioned some of them. We're talking about 2019 as the year for culture in Egypt and France. But as we'll be discussing shortly, there were so many agreements and memos that have been signed in so many fields. French have been here. They are among the most important investors, foreign investors that invest in Egypt. And in fact, we have provided this time with a more conducive environment for foreign direct investments, for not just the French, but foreign investors in other parts of the world. So there is an interest. And one of the main activities that we have witnessed during the visit is the economic forum, Egyptian-French economic forum.
Yes. Well, before we start really getting into the details of the bilateral cooperation between both countries, Dr. Abdelhalim, now France really wants to work with the African continent and the African Union, and really wants to make use of its strong relation with Egypt, and Egypt is now presiding over the AU. How can France help the African Union and the African Union countries, and how can the African Union countries really make use of the interests and the intention of France wanting to help?
The presiding over the African Union as being represented by the supremacy of the Egyptian Presidential Authority actually tours, perhaps the next February, I would say, would seem to be quite reflecting its shadows, not only on Africa, but actually crossing the borderlines of Africa and all other adjacent countries, actually. Emmanuel Macron was very much resourceful president, actually, at visiting Egypt at that particular time, selecting the right man in the right place at the heart of Africa, as represented by, you rightly said, the president over the African Union. And immediately it comes in less than a week of the previous visit on the part of Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, actually, of safeguarding and of saving his own life from, what you might call a tragic and instantaneous death at final moments, actually, by the interference of our own, political authority outside, and much same way that, Salva Kiir also would be very much interested in Egypt and the presidential authority, actually, at this particular time of the year, just by way of continuing, actually, the negotiations, by rebuilding and reestablishing and, reaching to a common consensus of opinion, actually, for the problematic situation of the Renaissance Dam. That's why whenever Emmanuel Macron would really insist on coming at that particular time of the year, it seems to be quite very much political, geostrategic, as much as geopolitical, actually. From strategic point of view, actually, the process of providing Egypt, actually, with the Rafalas around your Ambassador, Mr. Hafni, would say a couple of minutes ago, is very much, beneficial not only for Egypt by safeguarding the borderlines you know, I mean, from the south and from the north and the border lines that are very much adjacent to the Libyan territories. But in the meantime, actually, it's one way or another, actually, of practicing a sort of control over the Mediterranean area, particularly, actually, the recharting and the remapping of the gas lines, and the previous visit of, you know, I mean, Anastasiadis and Anastasiadis, actually, of both Greece and of Cyprus, actually, during the couple of months ago, seemed to be actually very much important in reshaping, actually, the whole map of the road within that area. Stemming from the fact that there is a sense of enmity that would reach to the extent of, you know, hatred and mutual animosity, actually, between Italy on the one hand and France on the other. Both of each single individual country would accuse each other, actually, of being very much responsible for straightforwardly propagating and directing, as much as encouraging, the sort of cross-bordering, as much as the illegal immigrants and illegal immigration, and the sort of the organized crimes and that sort of thing. And as such, it seems to be quite that the role that is to be practiced at this particular time by the Egyptian Presidential Authority, presiding the African Union, supervising its own regulations and regularities, as much as its own instructions over all, if not most of the African countries, would seem to be of a pivotal importance at this particular stage. That's why he is keeping an eye, actually, on insisting every now and again of, you know, mutually identifying his own strategic, geopolitical, as much as geostrategic relations with Egypt, stemming from the fact that, as I've just said at the very beginning of the episode, that we are very much similar and common to each other, actually, in more than one respect.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there were many agreements and memoranda of understanding was signed between both countries, one of which was signed between the Minister of Transportation, Hisham Arafat, and a prominent French transportation company, actually working on finalizing the fourth stage of the third metro line that we're having here. Now, we have an interview by Nile TV's Linda Abdulatif with the Minister of Transportation, Hisham Arafat. Let's check it out and we'll be right back.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today, Nile TV International. Could you please talk to us a little bit more about the agreements that you signed today?
Actually, they are one contract and two agreements. The first contract that had been signed today with the witness of His Excellency President Sisi and His Excellency Emmanuel Macron was concerning the final link of Line 3 that will connect Heliopolis Square to the airport, the Cairo airport. This link, I think, is one of the most crucial one for the Line 3, because it was our dream to extend the Cairo metro service up to the Cairo airport. So finally today we have signed the contract agreement that involves about the finance of this project by two portions. One portion is supported by the French government by 286 million euro. With very soft terms, with the grace period about 5 years and repayment on 12 years. Besides, also a small portion, which is about 50 million euro, was a commercial loan with also with the terms not more than 1.5 or 1.7%. We have another two agreements that have been signed today in the economic forum, which was one for the promoting the safety of the railways, because, as you have said, one of our main axes for promoting or enhancing the service level of the railways was to enhance the safety. So we are getting the national company for railways in France. They have the same problems that we have facing now since more than 18 years. During the negotiations with them, they have offered to help us in fostering the safety and the workability conditions of our network. We accept their negotiation, and they offered us a grant for the safety auditing of the railways. So we will take two lines, two crucial lines from Bani Suef to Giza and from Mbaba to El Manashi. They will conduct all the safety auditings required. including the signaling system, including the surface crossings, including the CTC or the Central Traffic Control, including some dialogue that will be conducted with the workers and the engineers there in order to find a way in order to increase the safety this percentage of our network. This is the second one. The third one was with RATP, which is the national company also in France for operating and maintaining the Cairo metro lines in order to operate and maintain line 3. Because I need to offer a new service level for the metro in order to promote also the commercial business, for example, in our metro lines, in order to enhance the maintainability of our rolling stocks and our network.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Ambassador, now this is a very important investment, a very important agreement that has been signed, finalizing the fourth stage of the third line of the metro. What does this highlight, really using the French expertise in finalizing a very important issue for Egyptians, which is transportation?
For Cairo's. We have to remember that all this started before 87, but I do recall that former Prime Minister, who became later President, Jacques Chirac, has visited Cairo in 1987, and that was the very beginning of that huge project that will see other lines to and the network expanding more and more to provide services for as much Kairos as possible. So 32 years of cooperation in the field of transport and specifically in the field of the metro, establishing that project. And I do recall that at the very beginning it was really very challenging, because the French entrepreneurs or workers, when they started digging underground, they would get so many surprises, so many electrical cables, telephone lines, the sewage, and so on. And of course, they had to deal with bureaucracy. But they have overcome, and we have overcome these problems along with them. And this is why I was saying a while ago that there is a good comprehension between the two people, and the two governments and the two states. They have a very good reading of the overall situation here in Egypt, and they know how to deal with it. And we got used to deal with the French enterprises, and realizing those French projects. It's not just the metro, but as we have heard from the Minister of Transport, there are other projects also with regard to the new administrative capital and the 6 October city. So this technical expertise is very much needed in Egypt. And, President Fattah al-Sisi, he will deal with everybody that could give a hand to widen the scope of that developmental scheme that we are all witnessing, and without which we are not going to create or reach the Renaissance era that we all dream of.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Abdelhalim, now, during their press conference, the French president, actually really reiterated his support for the economic reform program that Egypt is undergoing and the social development that Egypt is undergoing. Also, they supported the entrepreneurship and the social protection and the role of the women and the youth. How important do you feel that France can be investing and supporting Egypt, not just rhetorically, not just by words, but actually through their own investments and through the agreements that have been signed between both countries?
Right, a large number of contracts and agreements and memorandum of understanding actually would have been signed at that particular high-profile meeting actually. But the important thing actually that would attract my own attention actually during the course of the previous press conference is, you know, I mean, resourcefulness of Emmanuel Macron, of how, straightforward he would seem to be, as much as being very much sharp, of directing the interest of almost all the Western countries, including Americas actually, to the fact that still we do blame from some problematic situations, some lack of democratic institutional details and beliefs, as much as the glaring fact that you would insist on and upon during the press conference, which is, that Egypt would abide by a large number of political detainees and prisoners of political intentions, actually, that had been jailed for some reason or another. That was quite confusing to me, actually, at the very beginning. A man with such an extreme sense of friendliness and, deep sense of, mutual identification with the Egyptian presidential authority, to represent that sort of thing in his own friendly address, actually. But I was not wholly amazed or astonished to a greater extent by the sort of the answers on the part of His Own Excellency, Mr. Abdel Sisi, who would deliver in less than 10 minutes, actually, a very enthusiastic, as much as intelligent, 10-minute talk, actually, that should be translated, actually, and should be accepted here, there, and everywhere as a lesson of democratic leadership, actually. The fact that Mr. Abdel Sisi, His Own Excellency, would insist on representing that what would occur, actually, on the Egyptian territories has nothing to do, actually, with the political intentions, with the free thinking, as much as the democratic opinionations, actually. This is to a great extent, in much the same way that he would represent a sort of comparison, actually, between the Egyptian side, as much as the French, and representing to the whole world and to the Western countries, actually, that between this and that, between the East and the West, there should be lie. What you might call a huge difference, actually. The infrastructure, the beliefs, the sort of the cultural details, the civilized aspects, the moral details as much as the ethical details and the values, and the sort of the religious beliefs, including both sides, actually, both parties of the country, that is, the Christians as much as the Muslims, being represented in the new administrative capital by, the Cathedral of the Birth of Jesus Christ, as much as the huge Mosque of Al-Fatah actually. It's an interesting, highly democratic society that would abide by all the national as much as the friendly relations and the international beliefs, actually. It's a sort of mutually identifying what you wouldn't have to say a Christian Egyptian or a Muslim Egyptian, but actually we do have one single individual identity at the end of the day, which is, the Egyptian nationality, actually. No matter Christian or Muslim it may seem to be. This is at one level. And in the meantime, I was very much admiring his own very much resourceful, democratic, straightforward, convincing and logic answer, actually, when it was to be addressed, actually, of, the sort of the lack of the human rights details and the beliefs, by representing his own practical way of life, of answering the sort of very much resourceful question that, the act of medically treating the, the virus C, for example, as much as the other contagious diseases here, there, and everywhere, as much as abiding by and, inhabiting a large number of families that would seem to be at other respects very much expatriates, actually. This is part and parcel of the realistic solution, actually, of the human rights, of the beliefs that would have to be adopted, actually, on, realistic grounding, rather than expressing all these fanciful, imaginative details, actually, that has nothing to do, actually, with the realistic beliefs. One main fundamental fact also that, Mr. Abdel Sisi's Own Excellency is very much resourceful at representing and underlining. The fact is, in addition to the, the legal justice that is to be practiced And in the meantime, that we are very much keeping an eye of treating, of representing, of introducing actually all those detainees actually for the sort of the legal court actually to be waiting for the final persecution or, you know, I mean, setting free as quite blameless figures, I would say.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, both presidents actually witnessed the signing of about 8 memoranda of understanding that deal with the social development, the economic development, the role of women, the social protection and the entrepreneurships. And this was an interview that was held by our own Linda Abdellatif with the CEO of the French Development Agency, Rémi Riot. Let's check it out and we'll be right back.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us today in Al TV International. Now, could you please talk to us a little bit more about the agreements that you signed today with the Egyptian side?
So I'm Rémi Riot, I'm the CEO of the French Development Agency. So on behalf of the French government, of President Macron, supporting the development, the policies of the government of Egypt. And I was there to sign 3 agreements. One is a broad strategic partnership between AFD on behalf of France and Egypt, focusing on the social sectors, the social links between the people here in Egypt, on climate change, a huge priority for all of us, having signed the Paris Agreement, and also the private sector. We want to encourage private investments in Egypt and Egyptian private sector. And of course, we delivered first proofs of this commitment. The first one is a large program on women entrepreneurship with MESMEDA, the agency, the Egyptian agency for small and medium enterprises. So it's about more than 50 million euro, 52. Credit lines, technical assistance, well, to help provide more opportunities for women entrepreneurs here in the country. And the second one is to help the government implement universal health coverage, starting with 2 directorates and then hopefully expanding to the whole country. So it's 62 million euro with a lot of French expertise within to help. That's a key element, of course, especially in a country so vast as Egypt, for the well-being of the people, for their productivity as well. And I think that's a key element of the program, the reform program of the government.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Ambassador Hifni, now, the first stop actually of President Macron's visit, he went to the temple of Abu Simbel in Aswan. Also, later on, he visited the new administrative capital, and as Dr. Abdalhalim mentioned, he met Pope Tewodros II on the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. Now, how are these visits and these meetings as well with the Pope and the Grand Imam really reflect the cultural importance that France is paying to Egypt?
I will answer you, but let me go back to whatever Dr. Muhammad was saying a few minutes ago with regard of the fact that President Macron has brought up the issue of the human rights situation in Egypt. And let me tell you the following. We do not have any inhibition as far as raising that issue, whether it is here in Cairo or in the other capitals. Sometimes we initiate that discussion, you know, when we have concerns about the human rights of Egyptians living abroad, among other things. Now, you do recall also that when President Fattah Sisi visited Paris at the press conference, you know, he made it clear that nobody has a monopoly of human rights issues, and don't think that you have concerns only. we do have concerns as well. And you couldn't have concerns about the human rights situation in Egypt as much as we do. This is our people that we are talking about. And I recall also that he said that you do care a lot about the human rights of terrorists, but you never mentioned the human rights of the victims, you know. And this is why he had that brilliant idea of bringing to the table of the United Nations and all the international forums the fact that we should include among human rights the human rights or the rights of the victims of terrorism. Anyway, to come back to your question, I appreciated very much that President Macron and the First Lady of France have started their visit by going to Upper Egypt, because this message that he sent, to French compatriots, showing that it is safe to visit, it is safe to go for tourism and spend some time in Egypt. And we have seen it in the case of other leaders as well. The Vice President of China started his last visit by going to Luxor before coming to Cairo and being received by President Fattah al-Sisi. Something that we appreciate so much. These messages are very important. Now, talking about visiting the Al-Azhar, visiting the Orthodox Church, the cultural aspects of the relations between our two countries are very old and very important, very intense. But let me mention something here, two things in fact. He said when he was received by His Sanctity Pope Theodorus II that France is thinking of holding an international conference on the dialogue between East and West and create more rapprochement between the two sides, and to project that moderate image of the church and the mosque and the synagogue. Anyway, I mean, he has the same problem with terrorism, and he might have more important problems with terrorism when we get through and we reach a political settlement in Syria and in Libya and so on, because many foreigners are there, among them French, and they will be back to their country, some of them at least. So it is important to bring those ideas to the table of discussion and discuss them at the church, discuss them at Al-Azhar. But of course it was a good opportunity to go to the administrative capital and to see what we have seen ourselves on the 6th of January. You know, that was a message, a universal message, message that we have sent to the whole world about how Egyptians, they live in good harmony. So let's stop all that campaign about a part of the people are being persecuted by the other part.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Egyptian relations with France are actually thriving following this visit by President Emmanuel Macron. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
French President Emmanuel Macron's first visit to Egypt is expected to push forward bilateral relations, especially in economic fields, including investment and trade, as well as the political and military arenas. The announced agreements during Macron's visit will play an important role in increasing economic relations, especially since a diverse high-level delegation is accompanying the president. The visit, which was intensively prepared by the presidency, the Ministry of Investment and International Cooperation, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, as well as the French Embassy in Cairo, Egypt-France Business Council and the French Chamber of Commerce in Egypt, is considered a milestone in both countries. History of joint cooperation: French investments in Egypt are estimated at $4.5 billion, which include agriculture industries, information technology, construction, new and renewable energy, transportation, banks, aviation, water desalination, infrastructure and tourism, according to government data. French foreign direct investments to Egypt declined declined by 55.1% in fiscal year 2017-2018, reaching $240.3 million from $535.8 million over fiscal year 2016-2017, according to the Central Bank of Egypt's data. French investments are characterized by diversity in various sectors, especially in the fields of infrastructure, transportation, industry, communication and information technology, energy and the development of the SMEs. The trade balance between the two countries reflects a large deficit which is not in favor of Egypt. The most vital imports are wheat, machinery, electrical equipment and medicines, while in the main Egyptian exports are natural gas, oil, jet fuel, textile, cotton yarn, petroleum and its products and ready-made garments. The volume of trade exchange between Egypt and France hit $1.4 billion during the first 8 months of 2018, with $460 million in exports and $999 million in imports, according to Minister of Trade and Industry Amr Nassar, following his meeting with French Ambassador Steve Romatat, where they discussed future economic relations between both countries and current French investments in Egypt.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Abdulhalim, we are running out of time, but this is a final question, please, in less than a minute. Now, you've said that this visit is also a signal to other Western countries and maybe what they should follow suit. Now, after this visit, how do you feel the rest of the Western countries, be it the European community or the U.S. administration, how would they follow after this visit?
Oh, yeah, first lesson that is to be administrated, actually. The extreme sense of security and safety, actually, in addition to the vast popularity of the hospitality of the individual indigenous citizens, actually, of Egypt, at one side. At another, actually, see how peaceful the presidential procession of Emmanuel Macron, actually, would pass over the bridge, going from Giza to somewhere else, actually. Just being protected with, I wouldn't say, you know, by air forces and marines and that sort of thing, whereas on the other side, actually, you can see the cars of the civilians, actually, are working the other way around. So this is a clear testimony to the fact that Egypt is not only the land of history, as it has been known, actually, since 2,000 years ago, or 2 centuries, I would say. In addition to the fact that the democratic opinions, actually, of the sort of the give and take dialogue that's to be practiced on the part of His Own Excellency, Mr. Abdel Sisi, when he would quote the words of Jean-Audrien Devenant, Foreign Minister of France, when he would address the American administration, particularly at the figure of Donald Trump, that you'd have to leave us all alone, actually. And the visual result of that was the revolution of the Yellow Jackets. Yes. You know, I mean, scandalous affair, I would say. Again, Mr. Abdel Sisi would insist, actually, of representing that we are not infringing on other people's affairs. We are not interfering within other adjacent countries, actually, has it not been within the human rights or otherwise, actually. And in the meantime, one main fundamental fact that they would insist every now and again that we are fighting terrorism in lieu of the whole world. This is the sort of the didactic and the moral as much as the practical lesson and message that should be straightforwardly addressed, not only to America, but also to the Western world, I would say.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Abdulhalim has mentioned, hopefully such a relationship would be mirrored and reflected between Egypt and all the rest of the Western community. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate, where we were having a review of the 3-day visit of French President Emmanuel Macron to Egypt. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Muhammad Abdulhalim, the political analyst. I'd also like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Ali Al-Hifni, the former Deputy Foreign Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nara International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.